Hi there everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is going to be on eating disorders, disordered eating. So I've made notes as usual because I always find that I forget to say things that I really wanted to include it, and then after the video I'm like, ugh. So this time I've made notes, which I will always going forward. So an eating disorder is a mental disorder that is focusing around abnormal eating habits. It's an obsession with food, weight, and or appearance that negatively affects your life or the lives around those around you. But it is definitely a mental illness. And the reason I'm talking about this is because an eating disorder has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Any mental illness, second only to suicide. So eating disorders can be fatal, and they absolutely, with these statistics, we know that they are fatal in many cases. So it's important to talk about them. So I'm going to today. So again, just a quick overview. The first one I'm going to talk about is anorexia nervosa. So most of us know what this is. Anorexia nervosa is a real obsession with calories, restrictive eating, not just like a typical diet, you know, like you try out these diets here and there. It's a very restrictive diet. So these people may eat nothing all day, or they might just eat might eat an apple, they might eat a yogurt and a carrot. It's just extremely restrictive to the point that they are very low weight and underweight. They are terrified of becoming overweight. Quite often they see themselves as not being, they could be 80 pounds and they don't see themselves as being 80 pounds. So there is a real fixation on weight, a real fixation on the scale and on food. And there's a lot of hiding in this disorder. You know, when it first starts off, they kind of hide, pretend that they ate, they didn't really eat. It's all, you know, and this affects every age and both sexes. So people think this is typically, you know, when I was young, people would typically think this is just female. There is something called manorexia now. So there are boys and men that this is happening to. So it doesn't have an age, it doesn't have a face, it doesn't have a sex to it. This could really be anybody that you know. So anorexia is intense fear of gaining weight, obsessed with calories, restrictive eating, and not to be confused with something called, and I always say it wrong, cachexia. Cachexia is something that happens to people who are terminally ill. They might have cancer, they might have AIDS, a terminal illness when their body starts to sort of eat away at the muscle, and they appear to be anorexic, but they're actually eating. That is something, you know, if anyone's interested, I can talk about in another video. I basically just learned about this myself. Didn't realize it was because I'm more specialized in eating disorders. I didn't realize this is something that can happen. But yes, it's called cachexia. So not to be confused with cachexia, we are talking about anorexia nervosa. So anorexia nervosa, just statistically, and again, it doesn't really typically have, you know, you can't fit people in a certain peg. But statistically, these are normally the youngest sibling of the family. It is normally a very intelligent person. A lot of people that have anorexia are on honor rolls at their school, or they're very, you know, they're like the cheerleader of the school, like the best one, or a gymnast, or they're an athlete. Like they're very successful in a certain area. Not always, again, but you know, this is a typical statistically what an anorexia looks like. So typically the youngest person of the family, and something that is in common with most people have anorexia is control. So anorexia is a mental illness, and it is about control. It is usually people that feel like they're being controlled by everybody around them. I mean, think about it. If in the case of an athlete, maybe their parents are pressing them really hard to be the best at this, and their coach is pressing them to be the best at this. And there's a lot of pressure on anorexics. Pressure they put then on themselves to look a certain way and be a certain weight. And they sort of get, you know, as they restrict their food more and more, it becomes about control. It becomes about, now nobody's controlling me. Now I'm controlling me, and I'm controlling the food that goes in my mouth, and I'm controlling the number on the scale. And that's what it really becomes about. It's not always what you think. I mean, it may start off that this person wants to be thinner, or they're, you know, wants to look like this person or be thinner because of whatever reason. But it does quite end up being about something else. It's not always what you think. It's what you see is not always what you think and what that person is going through. So it's quite often it is psychologically, again, taking back control when they feel like they have no control in their life and this is the only thing they have control over. So that is anorexia nervosa. Certainly not something that I just talked about it in 4 minutes. It's a very big subject, and I don't mean to say that it's not, but I have a few other eating disorders that I'd like to go over, and I can talk about any one of these in excess. So if anyone's interested, you can reach out to me confidentially, and I would be happy to speak to you about anything. So number 2 is bulimia nervosa. Bulimia nervosa is something you may or may not know that I have actually experienced. Probably about 20 years ago, I was a bulimic. So what a bulimic is that it is binging and purging. So it's eating a lot of food, and not always a lot of food, actually. It could just be a regular meal, and then purging it. So you have to get rid of the food when you eat it. It could be a large amount of food, or it could just be a normal meal that you're getting rid of. So by purging, you could do that with throwing up. You could do that with exercising. You could do that with laxatives. So any point to get rid of kind of what you've eaten, right? And the other thing is another thing now that is sort of new that I didn't hear of back when I was, doing this myself 20 years ago, is something that is called cutting. I guess it's called cutting, and it's, visibly cutting yourself. So it all goes in hand with this bulimia nervosa. So bulimia nervosa is where anorexia is about control. Bulimia nervosa is about, or bulimics experience either shame or guilt or both. So it's either something maybe from your childhood, maybe from adulthood, it doesn't even matter of when it happened, but you experience a lot of shame and a lot of guilt that you're not talking about and you're not dealing with for whatever reason. You also, much like the illness, so you're binging and then you're purging, right? So what happens is you eat, you feel guilty for eating, so then you get rid of it. So you either throw up, take laxatives to go to the bathroom, or cut yourself after because you feel ashamed of that. You feel ashamed for doing that. So again, it's like a cycle in itself. It's an endless cycle in itself, and it's something that can be, I'm happy to say, something that can be corrected, and I'm living proof of that. And again, anyone who wants to reach out to me confidentially that wants to talk, I am here, so let's talk. So that's bulimia nervosa. So again, I just want to, with bulimia nervosa, you can't really tell that something is wrong with that person. They always kind of seem to be the same weight. Their weight typically does not fluctuate. Like with an anorexic person, you could almost always tell that that person's anorexic when it's severe because they reach like their skin and bones, and if it gets too far, they're so thin. With a bulimic, you can't tell. Bulimics do have bad teeth, like you can't see my teeth, but my teeth are really bad from the acid from throwing up. So if they are a person that purges in that fashion, your teeth eventually wear down. It's really not good. So you can't tell from just looking, but I know because I know what's happening in my mouth. But there are not a lot of telltale signs unless somebody is going to the bathroom every time after they eat, which a lot of people do go to the bathroom after they eat. So it's not 100% way to tell that that's going on. You can't always tell. That's my whole message of today, is you can't always tell that somebody is dealing with this. So we should be gentle and kind to everybody because we don't know what's going on with them. So binge eating disorder is kind of like bulimia, but there's no purging involved. So binge eating is eating massive amounts of food, a lot of food, and it's like mindless almost. These people feel like they can't control how much food they're eating. It's not due to hunger. It's excessively overeating, and they feel powerless. There is guilt and shame also associated with this eating disorder, and Again, the big difference is that they're not purging, so they're not doing anything to get rid of it afterwards, but it's still obviously a mental disorder. And it's, to me, how I sort of explain to people, it's like filling up an emptiness. Even with bulimia, when you're excessively eating, or even with bulimia, again, it could be one meal, you are filling up an emptiness when you are eating excessively of something else. There's something else going on. It's not about the food, and it's not about your hunger. So again, a mental disorder. So binge eating, many people struggle with binge eating and don't talk about binge eating. And let me say, with a lot of these things, a lot of people don't talk about what's going on, right? And you can't really tell. I mean, if you saw someone that was really overweight, you might be, oh, that person's a binge eater. It doesn't mean they're a binge eater. It just means they like to eat, and they eat excessively, and they don't feel bad when they do it, and they don't feel out of control when they do it. So again, you can't always tell what somebody is going through or what an eating disorder looks like. The next one I'm going to talk about is called pica. P-I-C-A. So this is, there has been some documentaries done on this if you're interested about it, but this is somebody that will eat dirt or soil, chalk, soap, hair, materials like certain cloths or fabrics, detergent, like there's all, the list is really, really long. So it's strange things that's not meant to be obviously food. It's in a lot of cases, these are dangerous things. They don't know why, but it happens with pregnant women sometimes, that they all of a sudden start craving these things and start eating these things, which is dangerous, obviously, to the mother and the unborn child. It's also like a mental disorder. It's also something that can be brought upon something very traumatic happening. And again, it's a way to satiate. And for some reason, the person is craving these things. It also could be the number one thing I think is nutritional deficiencies. So therefore, you're having these strange cravings that because you need certain minerals and vitamins in your body. And actually, you're not going to get it out of eating detergent, but your body kind of reacts to these deficiencies by having these strange cravings. Another very serious, these are all very serious, but another very serious, again, because if you're eating something like that has chemicals and poison, these are well, a lot of food have chemicals, but outright poisonous, some of these things that people are eating. So big cause for concern. Another one is called rumination. It's fairly new, this name that they've given to it. It's been around for a long time, but rumination is when, and can go hand in hand with some of these other eating disorders, but it could also just be on its own. And rumination is when somebody chews their food and spits it out. Chews their food and spits it out. Choose their food, and then they might swallow it the third or fourth time, or they might just keep spitting it out. And it's just to have the sensation of eating, but not to have the calories or the intake of food, or, you know, it's, so they're just chewing for the sensation of eating, but not really eating. So somebody who has anorexia could also do this same behavior. Someone who is bulimic could also do this behavior, or an excessive eater, overeater could also do this. So they sometimes are not, you know, separate of each other. Sometimes these behaviors go into these other disorders. ARFID is a new, so I'm going to have to look at this. They had an old name before, and they've updated it now. The Eating Disorder Association has updated. So ARFID is an acronym for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. So ARFID is going beyond, I mean, we all know people that won't eat certain things because of textures. I hear about it all the time doing nutrition, or eat certain food groups. Like they just don't eat, you know, vegetarians don't eat meat, or somebody restricting carbs doesn't eat carbs. This goes beyond that. This ARFID goes beyond that. Goes beyond having a picky eater. This is pretty scary because these people just will not eat major, like there's only certain foods that they'll eat. And it's dangerous because you can have a nutritional deficiency. You have, you're not eating maybe very much, and maybe your weight might be low. So again, it's beyond picky eating. It's extremely restrictive, and it's not safe. And again, can go hand in hand with like anorexia or even bulimia. With any of these other disorders, you could be doing this. So it's how do you know? I mean, a lot of people have children that they're like, oh my God, does my child have this? You'll know, like might only eat one or two things, but again, remember these are mental disorders. So there is a reason they're restricting this food beyond that not being good for them, or beyond making a choice like being a vegan or being a vegetarian. That's a totally different thing. This is something that they're restricting and avoiding for either fear of gaining weight or fear of unvalidated fears, right? So that's a fairly new one, but it had an old name before, called ARFID. So there's night eating. So you've probably heard of somebody that does this. There are people that get up in the middle of the night and they will eat to excess, go back to sleep, and they don't remember it. It's kind of like sleepwalking, but it's called night eating. Many of these people are overweight. Many of these people you can visibly see because they're doing it all the time. So it's another mental illness, and it's been around for a long time. And the dangerous thing about this is that these people don't even know they're doing it. The only reason they'll find out is because the cake in the fridge might be missing in the morning, or they wake up in the kitchen on the floor, or wake up with food on them, or unless like they're living with someone, they might not even know they're doing it if they're not even like really paying attention to what food is missing and all that. Then there's another eating disorder is just straight purging. So purging without the overeating, which I was talking about before. So basically being a bulimic, and you're getting rid of your food, but you're eating normally. So you are either throwing up, you're either overly exercising. So you have a sandwich and then you go, I have to go to the gym for 2 hours to work off the sandwich, and you've got it all down to how long you're going to work out for to burn off that food, or laxatives or whatever it is. That's purging. And that is also just as serious as all the other eating disorders. And again, can go hand in hand with the other ones, certainly bulimia. Then there is something called orthorexia, which they are not really classing as an eating disorder fully. They're putting it in the other category. And I think it's important to talk about because this is really prevalent right now, because there's such a focus on healthy eating, and you can go overboard with being too healthy. Like I've actually found myself that I have to pull myself back sometimes, and I have a degree in nutrition because I do have a history of an eating disorder. I had bulimia, and I have to take myself back sometime because I don't want to fall into the trap of orthorexia, wherein you are obsessed with healthy eating. And I hope I don't come across that way, because I really make an effort not to be that way, but it is what I went to school for. But it's important not to be obsessed with it. So this is excessive, like calorie counting, excessive like carb counting, excessive everything down to that. You may not even be on a diet, but you're just obsessed with like what you're eating. You may not go somewhere because they're not having healthy food. You're constantly thinking about what you're going to eat next and how healthy it is, and you won't eat something that if it's not considered 100% healthy by your standards. And this can be dangerous because it's obsessive, and there are going to be times that we have to go places and we have to eat something that maybe is not something I would consider healthy. That happens to me all the time when I go places, but I still find things to eat, depending on the situation. But it's not healthy to be obsessed with food. It's just not. And even healthy food, it's not healthy. So we have to find a balance in life that allows for these things to happen. So that's orthorexia. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about, I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything, is body dysmorphia. So body dysmorphia is when you have, again, an obsession, and when you have one or more perceived flaws. It may be, I'm going to use an example just to give an example. So let's say you think you have a big nose. So now you're obsessed with that big nose. You're totally obsessed with that big nose. You don't leave the house sometimes. You don't want to socialize. You think you're a horrible person because of your nose. Your body doesn't define you. Your nose doesn't define you. Maybe a bad example, but there are people that feel that way, or thighs, like your big thighs, for example, or you won't eat certain things because, you're trying to watch your big thighs and you're obsessed with your thighs. You think they look horrible, and every time you look in the mirror, that's all you see. And the thing with this disorder is that you might have big thighs and you might not. You might just think that you do. And the key here, everybody, is being obsessed with it to the point, like, we all have things that we don't like about us, but life goes on, right? And that we don't stop living our life because of it, right? And that's the key here. Like, this can be very, very serious. There's a reason I mentioned that this is only second to suicide. Like, it's the highest. Suicide is only second to, this is the eating disorders have the highest mortality rate. So they're very, very serious. So if you are having any issues with any of these things, if any of these things sound like they might be you and you want to reach out, I have a vast amount of resources for you. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Again, 100% confidential. I could totally help you out with this, and hopefully this has helped out anybody. And if you know somebody that is struggling or needs help, again, just be gentle. Just be gentle with everybody, because we honestly don't know what other people are going through, and we may not understand it. I mean, I know people that have said to me, for example, maybe I knew someone that was anorexic. They didn't get it. They're like, I don't understand. Just eat. Why can't you just eat? Well, you can't just eat. It's a mental disorder. That's the whole thing. It doesn't work that way. And you may not understand it, but it is very, very serious. And it's not really for you to, not that it's not for you to understand. I would like everybody to try and understand these things. But I guess just for you to know that if you don't understand it, it doesn't make it less real. It doesn't make it less validated, right? So, and again, my number one message when it comes to any mental illness, you cannot tell from looking at someone what they are going through. And, there are people that think people are faking and think that people are using this to get attention. It's not like that at all, It's a very serious illness, and we need to be talking about it more. So hopefully this helped you. If you want to reach out to me, I am Nutralicious on Facebook. You can private message me anytime. If you do know my number, you can text me to friends of mine that are on here, 100%, again, confidentially. I am lexi.velvet on Instagram. You can DM me there, or I am Lexi Velvet here on YouTube, and you can message me here too, I believe. So please reach out. Whether it's to me or to someone else, to get resources, to get help. There's a lot of help out there, and these eating disorders are very, very common, and unfortunately, and I would like to change that in the world. So reach out, get help, be well, and I'll talk to you soon.